Nursing students, time to talk. Real Talk School of Nursing.
Real Talk of School of Nursing.
Real Talk School of Nursing.
Real Talk of School of Nursing.
Say it louder. Say Real Talk
Real Talks
School
of School of Nursing.
Okay, let's do it again. Welcome to the Real Talk School of Nursing podcast with Michael Smith. 'Tis I, your good and faithful host, the incredible dancing Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. So one of the things that comes up in conversation a lot and might be helpful for somebody who is planning on looking into nursing schools or trying to decide which between several might be good candidates for where they want to spend the next few years of their lives. And how did I choose the nursing program that I ultimately went to? Well, I didn't just willy-nilly do things. That's probably, if you've listened to me for any length of time over the last couple of months, you know that that's not really my style. There were several programs in my state that I applied to. Each had their benefits, each had their drawbacks, each had a very, very different application process and how long between the application process and the start of school, which did factor in. For me, one factor was that I already had a bachelor's degree in another discipline. So if I was 18 years old and just graduated high school and was looking to go into, for example, an associate's degree, my decision process might be a little bit different. My decision process probably wouldn't be different, but the decision that I would make might be a little bit different. But basically, the system that I used, how I made the decision, is more complicated. So in the military, they call it a military decision-making process, or MDMP. You might just call it like a values criteria or a value-based decision-making process. So basically, I get to define the values and criteria and then give them an actual value. So, for example, just for this example, I'll use 5 different criteria. So my top 5 were location or the commute. So, for example, with 2 schools, they were pretty much the same distance away, but one was all basically highway miles, country miles, and the other direction or the other school was in the middle of the metro area, and it was going to be a drive almost entirely through the metro area. The second thing was cost of school. That factored in, so one was very cheap, but it lasted 3 years, and that gets to my number 3, the length of the program. So one was a little bit more expensive, but still reasonable. But one was much, much cheaper, but it would have taken 3 years to do. So essentially, the school pretty much would have had to have been free because of me being out of the workforce for a year. So if I'd gone to one program that was about 2 years, I would have gotten into the workforce sooner and started earning that income a year sooner. And because of that, the one that took 3 years was pretty much dismissed out of hand. So the other things, again, was, degree upon completion. I looked at a few associate's programs. I looked at a few bachelor's programs. All of them were post-bac or accelerated. And there are, I think, 3 or 4 master's programs in my state. But I looked at 3 of them anyway. And those all factored in. The other thing that I looked at was the program's NCLEX pass rate. If you're just starting out, the NCLEX is the battery test that you have to take at the very end in order to get yourself certified as a nurse. That's what actually gives you your RN status. So you just graduating from a nursing program doesn't make you an RN. That makes you have a nursing degree, but not an RN. So I rank them in order, so from first to last. So that's the first thing. So just that is just making sure, like, okay, I think that cost of school is more important than the commute. But length of the program is the most important above cost of school and location. Degree upon completion might be a little bit, so you just have to decide what of your criteria is the most important. And then the value that you give them. So for this example, there are 5 criteria. So I have, so the first one, or the most important value, or the most important criteria, I would give 10 points. For the second one, I would give 8. You might ask yourself, why would I, separate 2 points between 10 and 8? Well, because what that does is that it gives an actual separation between the most important thing and, the second most important thing. So you give double the amount of points for each one of your criteria. And then, so your last one, for example, or your last criteria, the one that you rank last, is going to be worth 2 points. And this is a simplified version of the real thing. So if any of you have actually done MDMP before, yes, this is not the exact way that it's taught and not the exact way it's used, but it is useful and simplified. So then I graph each one of these things and give each program its due points. So the thing about it is, this doesn't give you the decision, but it does give you information, so you aren't making a purely emotional decision. However, that said, that can still be factored in. You can still put those kinds of things in. So, for example, let's say you visited each school and you didn't feel like they were interested in you as a student. They were somewhat aloof, or it was too regulated and it just seemed impersonal to you, or something like that. Or you hated their parking system and you had to park really far away from your classroom. Maybe it's it's in a big metro area and there's not good parking, and so you're paying a ton of fees for parking, and it's limited and it's complicated. Again, that can be part of your decision. Maybe you want to look at how many different hospitals or different clinics that they do their clinicals in. If having a diverse set of experiences at several different hospitals is important to you, where you're exposed to a lot of different patient populations, or perhaps you are concerned that being at a single hospital would limit your employment opportunities afterwards. Again, that can all be factored in. It's up to you to decide what the most important and what the least important is, and which one of the which criteria actually gets counted. The short discussion that I have with people, so it's like, oh, well, why did you decide to go there? I'll give them a shortened version, which is basically, well, it took about 2 years to get an associate's. It took about 2 years to do a post-bac BSN or an accelerated BSN, and it would take about 2 years to get a post-bac master's. So I chose the master's because I already had a bachelor's degree, and I wanted to maximize the opportunities I would have after I graduated and being on the floor for a few years. Now, having been through this kind of regulated process, do I still did I discover other things that I wish I would have known beforehand? Well, of course. One of the other similar programs in the state I discovered has a really good reputation, and having talked with several people who've been to that school now, they have a much better reputation for supporting students. Like, they will seek you out and say, okay, we think you are struggling with this subject or with this concept a little bit, and we want to help you. So when can you come in, and we'll give you some individualized attention on whatever the subject matter is. Another Another program is very focused on holistic nursing, and my program is very public health nursing. Like it's a huge focus of my program. Overall, I'm happy, and I think having this process ultimately helped me make the right decision, even though there were a bunch of things that I discovered along the way that I wish I'd known. It probably wouldn't have changed my decision greatly, or I don't think I probably would have made a different decision. I think it probably it helped make the best decision possible, and I think ultimately, had I made a different decision, I think I probably would have missed out on some very important things. And hindsight's 20/20 and all that kind of stuff, and you never know what the future might have been had you made a different decision. But so far, I'm not really regretting being in the program that I'm in, even though sometimes it can really feel like that. When it's 2:00 in the morning and I have something to do at 7 a.m. or whatever it is. But overall, I think this is a really good regimented process that helps you make sense of the different kinds of the different decisions you can make, and how to best utilize the information that you do have about the programs that you're looking at. Sponsoring this segment of the Real Talk School of Nursing podcast is NRSNG.com. As a first-year nursing student, I found NRSNG, I did my free trial, and I was hooked. Since then, the team has added tons of great content and continue to add more every week. NRSNG is a complete education platform for nurses and nursing students, and includes video and audio courses, which is really great for both visual and auditory learners. They have cheat sheets, which has been great for referencing and recalling important information quickly and easily. There's a new phone app that so far I'm loving, by the way. There's a huge question bank, and there's books now. And when you're finally ready to prep for the NCLEX, NRSNG has a solid SimCLEX. In essence, NRSNG Academy is a complete solution for the nursing student and new nurse. They aren't overpriced, and unlike NCLEX Mastery, ATI, and Hearst, there's a lifetime membership option, which is very reasonably priced, and a decision that was really easy for me to make when I became a member. Rather than simply preparing students for a test, NRSNG provides a home base that members can come back to throughout their entire life as a nurse. Go to Real Talk School of Nursing Facebook page and our Twitter feed, and click on the link to get your free trial. Welcome back to it. So, one of the things I want to talk about today is about nursing pay. So there was an article recently in the LA Times about the nursing shortage, or a nursing shortage. Keeping in mind that a nursing shortage in California doesn't necessarily mean that there is a nursing shortage in the rest of the United States, in the U.S. Different markets have different, there's different schools in different markets, and there are, different pay scales. There are different, if there's a large, powerful union in that region, there might be, a different, anyway. There's lots of different things going on all around the United States. It's not, you can't broad stroke everybody into the same thing. But anyway, so there was an opinion piece saying that the nursing shortage is a sign that humanity's vital signs are weak. Well, first off, that's a decidedly terrible thing to say, and I'm sure it was meant to be divisive and bombastic in order to receive clicks, which is, obviously what we want out of our media. But it was the replies, to the editor that were published in the paper the next week that really stood out. The headline of the replies was this: "A nursing shortage doesn't mean society has lost compassion. It means we don't pay nurses enough." Well, you remember the old riddle about the twin brothers, one who lies and one who always tells the truth? I feel like in order to read these articles, one needs to use that test, the test of the two brothers, to tease out the truth. I cannot figure out how the editor came to the conclusion by reading the responses to write that headline, which means, essentially to me, they are the false brother. The article was posted on social media, which means that there are a few noteworthy perspectives that I think are worth considering. So the first reply that I saw is this, and I will just read it, kind of word for word. I think the market can't just poop out nurses at a fast rate. In addition to nurses not staying in the profession. It doesn't seem like pay is the issue. It seems like the work environment is the issue. Patients who don't follow patient education, an older and more highly medicated population, odd hours, working every other weekend, running your hind end off all night just trying to keep up while getting lectured by some cubicle driver who for allowing someone to fall because of the rules governing sitters and expenses, discharges, etc. It's not the pay. You reduce most nurses to 2 to 4 patients with all the responsibilities nurses have, and money isn't an issue. The job isn't an issue. There's constantly more and more responsibilities piled on without more time, more charting, very redundant processes and policies. Make charting simpler and easier where nurses don't spend nearly twice the amount of time charting as they do in actual patient contact. Then nurses can safely care for 4 to 6 patients. It's not the money. Another one similar, stated somewhat similarly, it's not the pay. It's the patient ratios. It's the work environment. It's the hotel service mentality. It's management that looks to reprimand instead of teach or correct the issue. It's aides who get paid to do a job that gets dumped onto nurses when it doesn't get done. It's electronic charting that causes us to be at the computer rather than at the bedside. It's hospital administration that says they are for the worker, but won't believe your side of the story or who side with the client when they complain. It's calling patients clients. It's pain when they say it is. It's push the Dilaudid fast. I want Benadryl. I want a sandwich. I want a pillow. It's nursing schools and the Nursing Association saying that an associate's degree isn't worth anything, all because other professions have a bachelor's degree. It's BSN programs talking crap about associate degree programs. And, everybody sits for the same NCLEX. The bullying starts in nursing school and only gets worse when you get into a job. So those were the two responses that I think probably most represented opinions of nurses or the plethora of opinions that were available for the article. And I think both of them had interesting points and brought up, some interesting discussion topics. So many of the replies state that it's not the pay. In my area, a new ADN nurse starts at about $33 per hour, and the average annual personal income is about $48,000. The average RN salary, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics and reported on Nightingale College, is a bit under $80,000. So again, that's average. That's, from the beginning all the way through the end of their career. So there are a few jobs in my area, for example, where it says, open to new grads. And it says that the position will be a 0.7 FTE or full-time employment. So you're working, I think it was at 32 hours or something, whatever it is. So at $33 per hour, that's a starting guaranteed income of nearly $49,000, which is pretty respectable if you're a 20-year-old and you're just graduating from an associate's program. But that's the lower end of the scale for sure, when you're talking about nursing pay. But I think since in that first year, you're actually going to probably get a night shift, and there's usually a night shift differential, and you're going to get overtime shifts because that, eventually you're going to be out of orientation. And that means that if you're working hard and you're motivated, a $70,000 salary in your first year is completely within reach in the first year using, my state's numbers. So let's look at a couple of other states. So in New Mexico, for example, the state with the lowest personal income average throughout the state, which is $37,000. The average ADN salary is about 70. In Connecticut, the state with the highest personal income average of $57,500, the average RN salary is $80,200. So if I look at the average RN salary adjusted for cost of living, most states are over $70,000 per year. South Dakota is under, but, it also has a much lower cost of living, so, that makes sense. Vermont, for example, is at 63, which, is pretty low as far as, average RN salary adjusted for cost of living, goes. The surprising one, or maybe not surprising, was New York, which has one of the highest cost of living and had one of the lowest average personal incomes, adjusted or not. So, suck it, New York. To me, this doesn't spell. Even New York. To me, this doesn't spell that the profession is suffering because nurses aren't getting paid enough, at least in terms of actual money. I might concede the point a little bit if we start talking about several combinations of other things that make nursing difficult, as kind of outlined in some of those comments. Additional charting requirements. Having worked at several different having clinicals at several different hospitals, doing my preceptorship at another systems hospital, and then working at a third hospital system in my area, they all chart differently. And each role is different, and each one has different criteria as far as, what needs to be emphasized, or how you do your reporting, or the hospital that I did my preceptorship at had this, at 10 o'clock in the morning, you would go do rounds, or you would do rounds, so you didn't actually go around to the patients because, nobody has that kind of time, but we would go into a room with the charge nurse, a dietitian, the caseworker, the floor caseworker, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and you would go through rounds and have all this kind of stuff. And it would, it might take, 15, it could take 5 minutes if you have a pretty simple caseload, which is not very common, or it could take actually a pretty decent amount of time. So it could take 30 minutes. Well, 30 minutes is a long time to be away from your patients. And even if you have a good working relationship with the nurses who are working to your left and right, them taking on an additional 4 to 6 patients, in addition to their own, or I should say 2 to 4 patients in addition to their own, is very easily overwhelming. And so I think there's something to be said by that, for that. Second thing that I just came up off the top of my head is fear of litigation. Third thing is patient satisfaction scores, rather than patient outcomes. To me is a very frustrating facet to healthcare and nursing these days. But what doesn't hold water to me is the argument of pay and patient-to-nurse ratios. If you have 5 or more patients during the day, it doesn't matter how much you get paid. I think there's just too much to do. And I think there's some personal pride in the care that we provide as nurses. I don't think you can really get through nursing school, and not feel some personal pride for the kind of care that you're going to provide. I just don't think that the type of person who would be nonchalant about the kind of care that they provide are A, interested in nursing, and B, probably not going to be, not going to make it through the program anyway. I'm sure that there are a couple here and there. Maybe you even know one, possibly two, but they're probably not going to stay in the profession very long anyway, or they'll just move on, or something. But if there are too many patients, I think people just feel like they're providing subpar care. So I've seen some statistics about 33% of nurses leave the bedside, leave bedside care in the first 2 years. That's stat, the way that it's stated, also means that somebody could be taking a supervisory position. If I'm working, with a master's degree and at 1 year and 11 months, I get, I interview for a supervisor position and I take the position. Am I really leaving? yes, I suppose I am leaving bedside care, but it's not because I'm getting burned out or anything else like that, as I'm taking a promotion. So I'm not really sure if that stat says what most people interpret it as. I've also heard, though I've not seen the numbers to back it up, that 50% of nurses who graduate today or graduate now won't be a practicing nurse in a decade. And I think that's, if true, that's a major problem. And unfortunately, I think people or management or unions or hospital administrators who think, who read this article and think that it's a pay and benefits issue are not interested in finding out what the problem is and are probably even less interested in finding a solution. So, welcome back. So, one of the things I want to talk about, or the last thing I want to talk about today, is about some family issues. And this certainly came up in December while everybody was getting ready for Christmas, wrapping presents, shopping. I was studying, and I was, putting the final touches on my master's thesis, getting ready for a farm exam. With an instructor who had no idea what they were doing. It was a pretty rough semester. As they all tend to be for different reasons, but this one seemed particularly arduous. So it became a point of tension with family. I think it's an important consideration whether you're pursuing a career, considering nursing school, or you're in nursing school, or you're just starting out as a nurse. So here's the main question. What is the greatest possible sacrifice for the greatest possible good? And I state it that way for a couple different reasons. So, while everybody else is doing the wrapping of the presents and going shopping and doing holiday stuff, I'm sacrificing all of that. I'm sacrificing time with the family in order to graduate nursing school successfully. So the question is, what are you willing to sacrifice in order to graduate nursing school successfully? And I'm not a very religious person, but I did grow up in the Catholic Church, so I do have some of the ideas and concepts floating around upstairs. So it kind of reminded me of the story of Abraham in the Bible. The story, or the idea of Abraham, is that at some point, God asks Abraham to sacrifice his only son. You might ask yourself what kind of God would ask someone to sacrifice their child at an altar, and you might also ask yourself what kind of man would sacrifice their child for a greater good. However, when you think about it that way, it says, I think there's something to be asked, or there's something to consider in this. Where and how much are we willing to put our families on hold for nursing school? I certainly don't want to sacrifice bedtime stories with my children, which every account says that reading to your children at bedtime, especially, has some amazing, has some really very heavily supported evidence that reading to your kids at bedtime has significant impact on them, both emotional, giving them emotional stability, academic success later on, and much, much more. So it would be a huge sacrifice on a parent's part to sacrifice a number of years of reading to my children in order to do homework or to be in class. I often have class in the evenings, or pretty much all my classes are in the evenings, and so, I'm gone when it's bedtime. By doing homework, am I not kind of partially sacrificing my child in order to pursue this career or pursue the school to enter the career? So perhaps the idea of sacrificing your children for the greatest possible good, or, in other words, one that you are able to provide a life for them, with a stable career and a, well-paying one for that matter, isn't that far-fetched of an idea? The balance argument to that, of course, is because we're ambitious people. I don't think if you're going through nursing school that I think you have to be a pretty ambitious person to take on nursing school. I don't know anybody who's not motivated and isn't pretty ambitious when it comes to their career goals and stuff like that. So for me, at least, when I'm aiming after a goal, I become really focused, and I tend to let other things go too much. And I think this is where being a non-traditional student has benefited me, because my natural bend is to just focus solely on the one thing that I'm doing. But because I still have to find a balance, because it's not a choice for me, I have some small advantage. Because I have to find balance. Like like I've said in other podcasts, I can't put parenting on hold. I can't decide not to be a parent someday just because I have some other things going on or I have school. And it kind of reminded me of this video, and I'm sure you've probably seen it on YouTube, or maybe it showed up on Facebook, but it was probably a long time ago. But the experiment, or how the video goes, is that there are 5 basketball players dressed in white, and there are 5 basketball players dressed in black. And you are supposed to count the number of passes between the white or the black team. And I don't remember which one it is, but at the end, you'll have to spit out an answer as to how many passes that you've counted. However, the question at the end won't be about how accurate you were in the number of passes you counted, but if you saw the gorilla. And of course, your response should be, what gorilla? And sure enough, if you rewind the video, you rewatch it, sure enough, you're going to see a big, huge, tall person dressed in a big, black gorilla suit walk into the middle of the shot, literally beat his chest for a little bit, and then saunter back off screen again. And he's not shy about it. Like, he's sauntering. I mean, it's a big show. And so because you were so focused on what that task was and what your goal was, what your value is, what you decided your value is, that you completely ignored reality. The reality is that there's a giant gorilla person walking through the middle of your screen, and you completely missed it because you were so focused on your goal. And so that's the balance side of the argument. So what's the moral here, or what's the moral in that? Again, it's my opinion, but it's fine to have goals. And I think you can make it through nursing school if you have kids or you have other life stuff going on. You can find a balance in your life and in nursing school and do both successfully. It was awesome chatting with you. I had a lot of fun today, and I'm really excited to keep this podcast rolling and help more nursing students like me get through this fun we call nursing school. If you like the podcast, smash that subscribe button. And remember to only leave 5-star reviews, because that's the only ratings that count to get us noticed by more nursing students. So go to wherever you download podcasts, subscribe, rate us, review us, right into the show. And please share the show with other nursing students. One team, one fight, and we can get through this together. This Real Talk School of Nursing podcast is a BKD production, produced by BKD. Winter Blues brought to you by J-Turn. Dizziness, headache, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, fatigue, somnolence, blurry vision, and ataxia are brought to you by the adverse effects of Banzol, Vimpat, Lamictal, Topamax, Gabapentin, Lyrica, and Zonogram. Sudden midnight wake-ups are brought to you by the sound of children jumping out of bed. The Real Talk School of Nursing podcast is a holy moly, I can't believe you're still listening to this podcast.